In a world where appearances are everything, one woman built an empire from silence and precision. Elara Morgan, elegant, composed, untouchable, was known as the mind behind a fashion empire that defined perfection. But behind every flawless seam was a scar, and behind every secret, a truth waiting to be unstitched. When tragedy strikes her family and betrayal begins to crawl through the walls of her own success, Elara is forced to confront the one truth she spent her life avoiding, that the empire she built to protect herself was the very thing destroying her. As power crumbles, alliances fracture, and the past demands payment, Elara must decide whether to preserve her image or reclaim her soul. Because in the end, the fabric of one's life isn't measured by wealth or legacy, it's held together by the invisible threads of truth, forgiveness, and love. The rain had that expensive kind of timing, arriving just as the funeral guests began stepping out of their black sedans, gloved hands clutching umbrellas that never quite opened fast enough. It wasn't a storm, just a soft, arrogant drizzle that ruined hair and composure in equal measure. Elara Morgan stood under the church's stone archway, watching them file in. Familiar faces from her past moved like a gallery of performances, her father adjusting his cufflinks though no one was looking, her brother Blake whispering to a real estate partner on the phone, her younger sister Rhea pretending her designer heels didn't sink into wet gravel. Everyone was performing grief, but not mourning. Elara didn't cry either. Not because she didn't want to, but because she'd cried all her tears 2 nights earlier, sitting alone in her mother's hospital room, holding a hand that had already cooled. Everything since then felt rehearsed. "Darling," Rhea called out, shaking droplets from her umbrella with a little too much flair. "You came. Thank God. You look," she tilted her head, scanning Elara's outfit, a simple black wool coat, no label visible, no shine. "Practical." Elara smiled politely. "Thanks for noticing." Rhea blinked, unsure if it was gratitude or defiance. "You could have borrowed something from me," she said, voice dripping in sympathy that smelled like perfume. "Mom would have wanted you to look your best." She cared about presentation. Mom cared about sincerity, Elara said. Presentation was just how she survived it. That silenced Rhea long enough for a camera flash to pop in the corner, one of the society photographers trying to capture the Morgan family farewell. Their family still had enough notoriety to make mourning a spectacle. Her father's voice thundered softly behind them. "Elara." He approached like a man who still believed he owned every room he entered. Frederick Morgan had built his empire on 2 things, debt and confidence. Both had aged poorly. His suit was perfectly tailored, but his posture had folded in subtle ways. He gave her a once-over, the way people appraise real estate they once sold too cheap. "You've been difficult to reach," he said. "I've been busy handling the arrangements you didn't," she replied. His jaw flexed. "That's not fair." Neither was leaving her hospital bills unpaid. The words hit him cleanly, quiet, sharp, true. He nodded once and walked away before she could see the expression forming behind his practiced mask. Inside, the church was a theater of well-behaved sorrow. The organ hummed low, the candles trembled, and the air smelled of lilies and regret. Rows of mourners shifted, murmuring condolences to people they barely knew. Elara found her place in the second pew, beside an empty seat that had belonged to her mother every Sunday morning for 20 years. Rhea glided in beside her, snapping a photo of the flowers before switching her phone to silent. Blake followed, late as usual, whispering to someone about liquidating quietly. His eyes flicked to Elara's coat, and he smiled the kind of smile that was both charming and cruel. "Still driving that old hybrid," he murmured. "Yes," Elara said, eyes forward. "Good for the planet. Bad for your image. I'm not trying to sell one." The priest began speaking, words about eternal rest and gentle souls, and for a while the world blurred into ritual. But Elara's focus slipped. Her gaze drifted to her mother's portrait near the altar, Margaret Morgan, radiant even in her 60s, a seamstress turned small business owner who'd built a life one hem at a time. That woman had loved without pretense. The irony that her funeral had become a networking event was almost unbearable. The first tear didn't come until she noticed something. The lilies on the casket were fake. Silk. Mass-produced. Not the kind her mother had grown in her garden. Rhea noticed the shift in her expression. Don't start, she whispered. They're prettier this way. Ilara turned to her sister, voice low. They're plastic. So? They last longer. Ilara closed her eyes. That was Ria in a sentence, everything beautiful but hollow inside. After the service, people mingled beneath umbrellas like dark flowers. Reporters loitered at the gates, waiting for statements or scandals. The Morgan name still carried currency and debt. Ilara stood apart, watching her family pose for sympathy. Blake spoke to a financial columnist, their father shook hands with an investor he still owed. Ria leaned toward a photographer, adjusting her veil just enough to frame her cheekbones. In that moment, Ilara understood something essential. They weren't grieving a person, they were grieving relevance. A gust of wind scattered funeral programs across the gravel. One slapped against Ilara's leg. She bent, picked it up, and caught her mother's handwriting faintly visible beneath the print, a note scrawled years ago on the reused paper stock from the boutique, "See people for who they are, not what they wear." She folded it carefully into her pocket. The reception was worse. Held in the family estate, a mansion they could no longer afford to heat properly, the air smelled of old money and unpaid bills. Crystal clinked. Laughter floated through hallways like ghosts pretending not to be dead. Ria basked in attention. I just signed with Maison Valderie, she told a circle of guests, voice sparkling. Their creative director personally reached out. It's a huge deal. Ilara, a woman in pearls, said, turning toward her, what do you do these days? Ria answered before she could. She runs Mom's little boutique downtown, she said sweetly. Keeps her busy. It's quaint. The word quaint hung in the air like secondhand smoke. Ilara smiled tightly. Yes, she said, quaint. She didn't bother explaining that the little boutique had quietly become the testing ground for an international fashion house. That beneath the vintage racks and creaky floors was a design studio with biometric locks and a production team working in 4 countries. That the invoices she signed every week could buy and sell every guest in this room. Let them have their illusions. It cost her nothing. Across the room, her father watched her, not with affection, but suspicion. He'd never understood her restraint. To him, power was only real when flaunted. Ilara had learned from their mother that true elegance didn't shout, it whispered, and still everyone heard. A knock on the door interrupted the hum of small talk. Their butler, the last one left, shuffled in. Miss Morgan, he asked, eyes darting nervously between them. There's an agent here to see Mr. Blake. Blake stiffened. Agent? Federal, the butler said quietly. The room fell silent. Conversations froze mid-word. Blake excused himself, trying to look unbothered, but his hand trembled against his glass. Ria's smile faltered. Their father's jaw set like granite. Ilara didn't move. She didn't even feign surprise. She'd known this was coming, she'd seen the filings weeks ago. Fraud. Mismanagement. It wasn't her secret to expose. The truth had a way of dressing itself eventually. Later that evening, when the guests were gone and the mansion had emptied of performance, Ilara walked through her mother's study. Dust had already begun to settle on the old sewing table. The last unfinished garment, a black silk blouse, still waited under the lamplight. She ran her fingers over the fabric and felt an ache like homesickness. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in memory, clothes tell the truth about their maker, even when people don't. Outside, thunder murmured far away. The city glittered beyond the garden, tall, bright, oblivious. Ilara opened her phone and scrolled through her work messages. Dozens of unread notifications flashed from her team, new textile contracts, expansion proposals, a Forbes interview request under her corporate pseudonym E.L. Rowan. No one in her family had ever connected the dots. A notification at the top caught her attention. Subject, confidential, Valderie acquisition confirmation. She tapped it. The message was simple, deal closed. You now own 82% controlling interest. Effective immediately. Ilara exhaled slowly. Maison Valderie, the very brand her sister bragged about, now belonged to her. In the silence of that grand, hollow house, she let herself smile. Not out of malice, but inevitability. Her mother's voice whispered again, calm and proud, sometimes the best seams are invisible. Elara looked at the black silk blouse once more, then folded it carefully into a garment bag. Tomorrow, she'd return to the boutique, her real kingdom, and finish the blouse herself. The family could keep pretending. The world could keep guessing. And she, the quiet woman in the plain black coat, would keep building empires in silence. Because real power, she'd learned, didn't need to be seen to be undeniable. Morning came like a secret, soft light filtering through curtains still heavy with last night's rain. Elara woke before her alarm, body alert in that instinctive way success never cured. She reached for the phone on her nightstand. 2 missed calls from her father. 3 from Ria. 1 from an unknown number marked Federal Inquiry. The world had started moving. She sat up, steadying her breath. Across the room, the city stretched toward daylight, all mirrored glass and ambition. Her penthouse was minimalist, every object deliberate, no excess, no vanity, nothing that screamed for validation. The walls held framed sketches of her first designs, geometric silhouettes drawn years ago in a cramped studio when Elara was just a woman with fabric dust on her hands and a mother who believed in her before anyone else did. Now, beneath another name E.L. Rowan, she was untouchable. Or so everyone thought. Her phone vibrated again. Ria. Persistent. Elara considered ignoring it but sighed and answered. Finally. Ria's voice was sharp with panic, stripped of its usual gloss. You've seen the news, right? Not yet, Elara said. It's everywhere. Blake's bank, they raided the office. There are agents and reporters, and Dad's losing his mind. You need to come home. Ria, Elara said quietly, I don't live there. You know what I mean. This is serious. They're saying fraud, embezzlement, I don't know. Dad's blaming everyone. I can't, her voice broke, the sound small, human. It startled Elara more than the news itself. Where are you now? Elara asked. In my apartment. There are photographers outside. I can't even leave to get coffee. They're treating me like I'm part of it. Elara pressed her palm against the cool marble countertop. You are part of it, she said softly. All of us are, one way or another. There was silence, then a whisper, what do you mean? But Elara didn't answer. Stay inside. Don't talk to anyone. I'll handle it. She hung up before Ria could protest. By mid-morning, the boutique on Cypress Avenue was alive with motion, interns steaming garments, stylists prepping a new window display. The shop smelled faintly of lavender and fresh cotton. Outside, a delivery truck unloaded crates marked Rowan/private collection. To passers-by, it looked like any other upscale fashion delivery. Only Elara and her senior staff knew that inside those crates were samples from a brand newly under their control, Maison Valderie. Elara watched from the mezzanine, black coffee cooling in her hand. Her assistant, Tomas, approached with a folder. Morning brief, Ms. Rowan. Any updates from Valderie's board? They signed the final integration papers at 6 a.m. Paris time. You now have full operational authority. Their creative director resigned, effective immediately. Good, Elara said. Offer her a consulting role for 3 months. Publicly, we'll call it a transition. Privately, we'll rebuild everything. Tomas nodded. Also, the press is connecting the Morgan name to the Rowan brand. A few blogs have noticed the overlap. She turned to him, eyes sharp. How close are they? Close enough to speculate. Not close enough to prove it. Elara sipped her coffee. Then let them wonder. He hesitated. Should I prepare a statement? No, she said. Mystery sells better than confession. By noon, the city's headlines were merciless. Morgan dynasty crumbles, bank under investigation, modeling contract terminated. Ria Morgan dropped by Valderie amid scandal. Where is Elara Morgan? She stared at the last headline on her monitor, the question blinking like an accusation. Where was Elara Morgan? Right here, 2 floors beneath her boutique, running an empire disguised as retail therapy. The irony was almost operatic. Her team didn't know the family connection. To them, Rowan was a meticulous visionary with a mysterious past, a CEO who spoke softly but carried decisions like verdicts. They admired her efficiency, her control. None of them suspected the woman who approved multi-million-dollar acquisitions was the same one who once sold discounted scarves to pay hospital bills. Control was her armor, and she wore it beautifully. The bell above the boutique door chimed. Ilara looked down from the mezzanine. Rhea had entered, hood up, sunglasses large enough to hide a scandal. She looked smaller than usual, stripped of her social media gloss. "Ilara," she whispered, glancing around. "Can we talk? Please?" Ilara gestured toward her office upstairs. When Rhea entered, she stopped short. The room was minimalist but expensive: pale ash wood, framed sketches, a wall of screens showing markets and textile feeds. "This doesn't look like a boutique office," Rhea said, suspicion coloring her voice. "It's efficient," Ilara said simply. "Sit." Rhea obeyed, perching on the edge of a chair. "They're tearing us apart out there," Rhea said. "Blake's lawyers won't pick up. Dad's acting like it's everyone's fault but his. The press is using old photos of me, calling me the spoiled sister. I don't know what to do." Ilara studied her. The eyeliner had smudged. Her voice trembled on certain syllables. There was still beauty there, but it had lost its sharpness, like a diamond chipped from being shown too often. "You're not used to silence," Ilara said quietly. "You're used to applause." Rhea looked up, defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you built your worth on attention. Now that it's gone, you don't know who you are." Rhea's lip quivered. "You're enjoying this?" "No," Ilara said. "I'm observing it." Rhea stood abruptly. "You think you're better than us because you run that little shop." "Sit down," Ilara said. The command was soft but carried weight. Rhea froze, then sank back into her seat. Ilara leaned forward. "You think this place is small. It isn't. What you see upstairs is a disguise. You've spent your whole life obsessed with surfaces, Rhea. Did you ever wonder why I never corrected you?" Rhea frowned. "Correct me about what?" Ilara didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she opened her laptop and turned it toward her sister. On the screen, a portfolio of brands, corporate filings, subsidiaries. The name E.L. Rowan appeared at the top, alongside the logo of Maison Valderie. Rhea's eyes widened. "What is this?" "Ilara Rowan," she said calmly. "It's me." For a moment, Rhea didn't process it. Then she laughed, a nervous, high sound. That's not funny. I'm not joking." The laughter died. Her eyes flicked from the logo to Ilara's expression, searching for cracks and finding none. "You own Valderie?" "I own everything beneath it," Ilara said. "The factories, the licensing, the designs you wore on your last campaign. When you modeled their winter line, you wore something I made." Rhea's mouth opened, then closed. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because none of you ever asked who I was, only what I had." Rhea sank back, eyes glassy. "All this time, yes," Ilara said. "All this time." Silence stretched between them, heavy, intimate, final. Rhea whispered, "Blake's going to jail, isn't he?" "Probably," Ilara said. "But it's not my place to decide. The law will handle that." "And Dad?" "He'll fall quieter than the rest. Pride makes less noise when it breaks." Rhea stared at her hands. "So that's it? You're just going to let everything collapse?" Ilara studied her sister's reflection in the glass. "No. I'm going to rebuild what's worth saving. But not in the way you think." That evening, Ilara drove to the Morgan estate. The gates were open, the lights dim. Inside, her father sat alone in the study, surrounded by papers, bank notices, foreclosure warnings, letters stamped urgent. He looked up as she entered. "You've come to gloat," he said. "I came to talk." He gestured to the chaos. "Talk about what? The empire I lost? The son who ruined it? Or the daughter who thinks she's above all of us?" Ilara walked to the fireplace, her reflection merging with his in the glass. "None of those. I came to talk about the house. The house? I'm buying it, she said. His laugh was low and bitter. From who? Me? From the bank. Tomorrow. He turned to face her fully. Why? Because Mom loved this place, Elara said. And because you don't deserve to watch it burn. He fell silent. For the first time in years, he looked smaller, not physically, but spiritually diminished. You always thought you were better than us, he muttered. No, she said. Just different. I learned to build instead of borrow. She handed him an envelope, legal papers, clean and precise. You can stay until you find something smaller. The trust will cover your needs. After that, it's on you. He looked at the papers without touching them. You think this makes you the good one? I think it makes me decent. Their eyes met, father and daughter, pride and restraint, and in that quiet, the full weight of their family's collapse settled like dust between them. Elara turned to leave. For what it's worth, she said, pausing at the doorway, Mom wanted me to look after you. She didn't say I had to forgive you. Outside, the night was clear, the moon a thin seam of light over the city skyline. Elara got into her car, started the engine, and let the silence wash over her. She didn't smile this time. Power didn't thrill her, control didn't comfort her. What did was something else entirely, the thought that somewhere, her mother might be watching, proud that her daughter had finally learned to stand tall without shouting. In the rearview mirror, the mansion's windows went dark, one by one, until only the faint reflection of her own eyes remained. She drove away, her mother's words echoing softly in her mind, when you stitch truth into power, it never comes undone. And for the first time in years, Elara allowed herself to believe it. Rain again. Always rain when things began to break. 3 weeks had passed since Elara revealed her secret to Ria and reclaimed the family estate through quiet transactions. The world above ground had grown louder, newspapers obsessed, investors restless, whispers of the hidden heir who built an empire in plain sight. But the noise couldn't reach her sanctuary. The boutique remained her cathedral of control. Every morning she arrived before dawn, unlocking the glass doors to air still heavy with fabric scent. The silence felt earned. Here, her world stayed obedient, threads aligned, colors obeyed her palette, and the hum of sewing machines drowned out chaos. But today, control felt different. Fragile. Tomas appeared in her doorway, pale. Ms. Rowan, you should see this. He handed her a tablet. On the screen, breaking news, federal investigation expands to Rowan Holdings. Elara's fingers tightened around the device. The article was brief, factual, damning. Authorities have issued subpoenas for documents related to the acquisition of Maison Valderie. Sources suggest a possible connection to the ongoing Morgan Bank fraud investigation. Her brother's sins had become hers by blood. By noon, her board demanded an emergency meeting. Elara drove across the city through a haze of reporters and traffic lights blinking red like warnings. The conference room greeted her with cold stares and legal folders. Her CFO, a sharp man named Adler, began without ceremony. They think you moved assets through shell subsidiaries tied to Morgan Bank. You didn't, of course, but your family's name is poison right now. Optics are dangerous. She said nothing, scanning the documents. Each accusation was technical, vague, but real enough to ignite scandal. Adler leaned forward. We can distance the company from the Morgan name, but it means total separation, legally, publicly, emotionally. You'll have to deny association. Deny, she repeated, her tone measured. You want me to erase my own family? He hesitated. It's business, not betrayal. Elara closed the folder. It's both. That evening, she stood in the penthouse by the window, city lights splintered across the glass. She held her mother's notebook, the one she always kept close. The ink on the last page was fading. Grace under scrutiny is rarer than wealth. She whispered, you were right again. Her phone buzzed, a private number. She almost ignored it until the voice came through. Elara Morgan? It wasn't a reporter. It was Agent Pierce, the same federal officer handling Blake's case. I need a statement, he said. We have records showing your company bought assets from Morgan Bank during insolvency. It's routine procedure. Routine, she asked, voice steady. Raiding my warehouses would be routine too? Not yet, he replied. Help us, Ms. Morgan. We're tracing financial misconduct that affected real people. If you're clean, transparency helps you. Something in his tone wasn't hostile. It was almost human. I'll cooperate, she said finally. But I won't betray my brother. I didn't ask for betrayal, Pierce said. I asked for truth. The next morning, Elara arrived early at the estate. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock her mother used to wind every Sunday. Blake sat at the dining table, unshaven, eyes hollow. A bottle of whiskey leaned against the papers spread before him. He didn't look up when she entered. So, you're here to watch me drown too? I'm here to tell you to stop digging. He laughed, a dry, broken sound. You don't understand, Elara. It's not just me. Dad knew. The deals I made, they kept this family floating for years. Her jaw tightened. You used stolen money to pretend we were still rich. I used what I had to buy us time, he shouted, slamming his hand against the table. And you, what did you do? Hide in your shop and wait for us to fail? She stepped closer. I built something honest. You built a lie. Blake's voice cracked. I did it for her. For Mom. I wanted to give her back everything Dad lost. The confession hit harder than she expected. For a moment, her anger faltered. She saw not a criminal, but a boy trying to repair something too broken to mend. Mom never needed palaces, Elara said quietly. She needed peace. He covered his face, shoulders shaking. They're going to arrest me, aren't they? Elara looked at him for a long time, the brother who had mocked her for years, who'd called her the quiet disappointment. Now he was small, terrified, and painfully human. Yes, she said softly. But I'll make sure you survive it. That night, she made a choice that would change everything. She called Agent Pierce. You want transparency, she said. I'll give it to you. But on my terms. He agreed to meet in person. They met in a quiet cafe on the edge of the financial district, neutral ground. Pierce was younger than she'd imagined, sharp, observant, the kind of man who missed nothing. Off the record, he said, sipping coffee. You could walk away from this clean if you disassociate legally. Your family's liabilities would stay theirs. Elara studied him. And if I don't? Then the investigation could take you down too. She smiled faintly. You think I built all this to walk away when it gets hard? I think you're smart enough to know when survival requires sacrifice. She leaned forward. Tell me something, Agent Pierce. Do you have family? He hesitated. A sister. Then you understand. You can't amputate blood without bleeding yourself. He met her eyes, almost reluctantly. Then be careful whose wounds you choose to keep open. 2 days later, Rowan Holdings went public with a statement. The company stands by its founder and maintains full transparency with federal authorities. Any transactions with Morgan Bank were conducted legally, prior to insolvency. The world reacted as expected: speculation, praise, scrutiny. Stock prices dipped, then surged. She'd survived the first blow. But inside, something had shifted. Control no longer felt like victory. It felt like isolation. Her days blurred into negotiations, interviews, damage control. Her nights into silence. Even her success had begun to sound like an echo, hollow, rehearsed. One evening, as she locked the boutique's front door, she noticed Rhea sitting on the curb outside, drenched from the drizzle, makeup smeared. Elara, she said weakly, I have nowhere else to go. Elara hesitated. You have your apartment. They took it, Rhea whispered. Valderie repossessed everything under my contract. I don't even own the clothes in my closet. For a long moment, Elara said nothing. Then she unlocked the door again. Come inside. Inside the boutique, the light was warm, forgiving. Rhea wrapped herself in a shawl from the rack, one of Elara's earliest designs. Do you hate me? Rhea asked, voice small. Ilara looked at her sister, really looked, not the influencer, not the rival, but the fragile, frightened girl beneath the performance. No, she said. But I did envy you once. Envy me? Rhea laughed bitterly. Why? Because you got to be seen. I built my life hiding in plain sight. Rhea's eyes softened. And now? Now the world sees too much. Later that night, after Rhea fell asleep on the boutique's couch, Ilara sat alone at her work table, sketching without purpose. Her hand trembled slightly, something it hadn't done in years. She realized, with quiet terror, that she no longer knew what she wanted. She'd built everything to prove her worth, and now, with the proof undeniable, it felt meaningless. Her mother's words returned like a ghost, power reveals character, not worth. For the first time, Ilara wondered who she was when no one needed saving. The next morning brought a different kind of storm. A courier arrived with an envelope marked confidential. Inside were photographs, surveillance stills, time-stamped, grainy but clear. One showed Blake meeting a man outside a courthouse. Another showed Rhea leaving Ilara's boutique. The third showed Ilara herself, sitting across from Agent Pierce in the cafe. A handwritten note beneath it read, "Not everyone in your circle wants you clean." No sender. No signature. Her chest tightened. Someone was watching, and worse, someone inside her company was feeding information. The illusion of control cracked like glass. For the first time since she'd built her empire, Ilara Morgan felt fear. Not for her image. Not for her fortune. For the one thing she'd fought to protect, the truth beneath the seams. That night she stood on the boutique's rooftop, wind cutting against her coat, city lights shimmering below. If survival meant becoming ruthless, she could. But the cost was becoming the very thing she'd spent her life resisting. Lightning flared in the distance, the kind that split the horizon into jagged threads of light. "Maybe this is what you meant, Mom," she whispered into the rain. The moment when grace cost something real. She turned back toward the stairwell, determination replacing fear. If someone wanted her empire, if someone wanted to expose her truth, they were about to learn what happened when the quiet woman stopped hiding. The rain stopped, but the air still carried the smell of thunder that charged quiet after chaos, when the city seemed to hold its breath. Inside the boutique, everything looked the same, the polished wood counters, the mannequins dressed in quiet confidence, the lavender candle burning low. But to Ilara, the space no longer felt safe. It felt observed. The photographs from the anonymous envelope lay spread across her desk like evidence in a case she didn't remember agreeing to stand trial for. Someone was watching her. Someone close. Tomas entered with her afternoon reports. He hesitated when he saw the photos. "Is everything all right, Ms. Rowan?" Ilara didn't look up. "Close the door." He obeyed. "When was the last time we ran a full internal audit on communications?" she asked. "Last quarter." "Do you think," she interrupted, "that there's a leak inside this company?" Tomas's face paled. "A competitor? Maybe. Or someone with a grudge." He frowned. "You've been in the press a lot lately. It could be a tabloid leak." "No," Ilara said. Her voice was sharp but low. "These weren't taken for money. Whoever did this wants control." She picked up the photo of herself sitting with Agent Pierce. The reflection of the cafe window in the image was faint, but in that reflection, she could almost make out another figure, blurred, standing across the street. Watching. "I want you to pull every access log, every security feed, every encrypted file from the last 30 days, she ordered. "Yes, ma'am." "And Tomas," she added as he turned to leave, "if you find something, bring it only to me." He nodded, eyes wide. When he left, Ilara exhaled slowly, her pulse steady but cold. This wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about survival. That night, she returned to the estate. The house was darker now, whole rooms unplugged, furniture covered in white sheets. Rhea had taken over the guest wing, still finding her footing between shame and rediscovery. Blake was gone, transferred to federal custody after his bail hearing. Her father waited for her in the old study, where the light from the fireplace flickered across portraits of ancestors who had built fortunes the way men built myths, out of debt and ego. "Ilara," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "We need to talk." She stood in the doorway. "I'm listening." He poured a drink and gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." "I'll stand." He shrugged. "Suit yourself. The investigation's closing in. You think your fancy lawyers can keep your name clean when the feds start connecting dots?" "I've done nothing wrong." "Guilt doesn't matter," he said. "Perception does. You've made enemies, powerful ones. They'll use your family's sins to bury you." Ilara studied him. "Are you warning me or threatening me?" "Both," he said. "You took my house, my company, my son's freedom. What's left for me except words?" She looked around the room, the dusty ledgers, the hollow trophies, the ghost of a legacy built on appearance. "You built this family on illusions. I'm not the one who broke it." "Maybe not," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "but you're the one who wants to rewrite it. And that makes you dangerous." Their eyes locked, pride against principle. "I don't want revenge, father," she said softly. "I want honesty." He smiled, thin and bitter. "Honesty doesn't pay the mortgage." "Neither did you." The silence that followed was years old, the kind made of unsaid apologies and unresolved blame. Then he set the glass down. "You'll see, Ilara. Power isolates. It always has. It always will. You think you're immune because you earned it instead of inherited it, but the world doesn't care. They'll crucify you the same way they did me." She turned to leave. "The difference," she said, "is that I'll still be standing when they're done." The following day, Tomas called her into his office, a rare reversal of authority. "I found something," he said quietly. On his computer screen, lines of data scrolled fast, logins, encrypted transfers, message traces. He froze one. "This file was sent from our internal system to an outside server 3 nights ago. It contained acquisition records and personal correspondence, yours." "Whose credentials?" she asked. He hesitated. "Mine." Her head snapped up. "But I didn't send it," Tomas said quickly. "It came from my terminal while I was home. Someone used remote access." Ilara felt her stomach drop. "Trace it." He typed, fast, nervous. The results loaded, an IP address, masked through several reroutes. Finally, one unshielded endpoint appeared. Ilara stared at the location. It was the Morgan estate. That evening she confronted her father again, this time without patience or pretense. He sat in the same chair, the same drink half-empty beside him. "You leaked my data," she said. His expression didn't change. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." He looked at her then, slow, deliberate, dangerous. "I did what I had to do." "For what?" "To remind you who made you." Her voice broke. "You sold me out." "I warned you," he said, voice calm. "You're not untouchable. Someone approached me, a journalist, maybe more. They said they could make this all go away if I gave them proof you're not clean. I gave them scraps. Nothing serious." "Scraps?" Ilara's breath trembled. "You gave them my life." He slammed his fist on the armrest. "You stole mine first." The sound echoed through the hollow house. For a moment, neither spoke. The fireplace crackled. The rain began again outside. Then she said quietly, "You're right. I took it. But I was trying to save what was left of us. You were so busy playing Empire, you didn't notice the foundation rotting beneath your feet." He leaned back, face drawn. "You think the world will love you for it? You think the truth will protect you? They'll eat you alive, Ilara. Then I'll teach them to choke." She turned and walked out, her heels sharp against the marble. In the hallway, she stopped, gripping the banister. Her body shook, not from fear, but from the weight of finally breaking something she'd spent her life trying to fix. That night, the anonymous sender resurfaced. Her private email pinged, "You think exposure is your greatest threat? It isn't. Look closer. Someone inside wants your crown. Attached was another photo, this one of Tomas, in her office, speaking with a woman she didn't recognize. The timestamp, last night. Ilara's heart stuttered. For a brief second, she wondered if she'd misjudged everyone. If the circle she'd trusted was tighter than a noose. She called Tomas immediately. Straight to voicemail. Then she called Ria. Where are you? At the estate. Why? Stay there. Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone. Ilara, you're scaring me, just do it. She hung up and grabbed her coat. The drive back to the estate was a blur of headlights and dread. The city's skyline shrank behind her like a memory she couldn't afford to revisit. When she arrived, the gate was open again. The lights were off. The air felt wrong, too still. Inside, the front door hung ajar. She stepped in carefully, heels silent on marble. Ria, she called. No answer. Her pulse quickened. She moved through the halls, the portraits watching like witnesses, until she reached the study. There, her father sat slumped in the armchair, drink spilled, papers scattered. His breathing was shallow, erratic. Dad, she rushed forward. What happened? He blinked slowly, lips pale. Not your fault, what? He coughed, voice breaking. They came, for the files, she froze. Who? But before he could answer, his hand fell limp against the armrest. Footsteps echoed behind her. Ilara turned, and Tomas stood in the doorway. For a moment, everything inside her stilled. Tomas, she whispered. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. I tried to stop them, he said. But it's bigger than us. Who's them? He shook his head. You need to run. The sound of sirens pierced the distance, faint at first, then growing closer. Ilara's mind raced. Someone had set her up, the photos, the leaks, the connection to her father's death. Everything was converging. Tomas, she said, voice trembling now, tell me the truth. Did you betray me? He hesitated, and that pause was answer enough. The sirens wailed louder, red lights spilling through the rain-streaked windows. Ilara stood frozen, the empire she'd built collapsing around her in the quietest, cruelest way, not with noise, but with betrayal. She looked once at her father's still form, then at Tomas, and whispered, you should have let me stay invisible. Outside, the police cars arrived. Inside, the rain began again, soft, relentless, washing away everything that once sparkled. Red and blue lights fractured across the marble floors, painting the hall like a broken cathedral of guilt. The sirens outside screamed through the rain, each wail a countdown. Ilara stood in the doorway of her father's study, soaked in the pulsing light. Her father's body slumped forward, his glass shattered at his feet. Tomas hovered near the wall, face drained of color, hands trembling like he couldn't remember whether to reach for her or run. Tell me what you did, Ilara said. Her voice didn't rise, it cut. Low. Cold. The kind of voice that didn't ask for answers, it extracted them. Tomas swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to go this far. They only wanted access to the files, proof of your transactions with the bank. Your father was supposed to cooperate, not die, she finished. He flinched. Who are they? Tomas's gaze dropped to the floor. A consortium. Investors. People who think you built too much power in one place. They wanted leverage, your reputation. Her heart pounded so loud it hurt. You gave them everything. I was trying to protect you, he burst out. They had dirt on me, forged documents, blackmail. I thought if I gave them something small, they'd stop. Then your father found out and threatened to expose everything. And now he's dead. The words hit him like a blade. He stepped closer. Ilara, please. You have to believe me, but before he could finish, a voice shouted from the hall, police. Hands where we can see them. The room exploded into motion. Officers flooded in, shouting commands, weapons drawn. The rain outside intensified, slapping the windows in sync with the chaos. Ilara raised her hands slowly. I didn't, a detective cut her off. Elara Morgan, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence. Her world snapped into silence. Obstruction. Evidence. It didn't matter what she'd done or hadn't. The illusion of control, her most exquisite creation, evaporated under flashing lights. As they read her rights, Tomas tried to move toward her. She didn't. Step back, an officer barked, forcing him away. Elara's eyes met Tomas's one last time. His expression was a mixture of guilt and terror, the look of a man watching something irreplaceable burn. She whispered, "Get Ria out of here." Then they took her. The rain didn't stop. It followed her in memory, the metallic rhythm against the car roof as the city blurred by in streaks of neon and regret. At the precinct, under the dull fluorescent light, she became what her family had always accused her of being, a mystery that no one understood. A woman too calm for tragedy, too composed for innocence. Agent Pierce was waiting for her. His face was unreadable, his tone professional. "I told you to be careful," he said quietly. Elara met his gaze. "You think I killed him?" He didn't answer right away. "We're investigating." Forensics found his drink laced with a sedative, not enough to kill, but enough to incapacitate. There was a struggle. His fall caused the fatal injury. Her breath caught. Someone staged it. "Maybe," Pierce said. "But the security footage was wiped from the estate system at 8:17 p.m., exactly when you were there." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "I didn't touch it." He leaned closer. "Then who did?" She thought of the photographs. The anonymous messages. Tomas's pale face. The invisible hands moving her life like pieces on a board. Pierce watched her carefully. "If you're innocent, help me prove it. But that means giving up your secrets, all of them. Including Rowan." Her silence was answer enough. He sighed. "Then I can't help you." Hours later, in a cell that smelled faintly of bleach and old tears, Elara sat on the narrow cot, back straight, mind whirring. Her reflection in the steel wall looked like someone she barely recognized, hair damp, eyes hollow, jaw set with quiet fury. For 34 years, she had stitched her life into something immaculate. Every decision, every lie, every silence had been measured. And now it had all unraveled. But beneath the humiliation was a strange, rising clarity, a realization that she was no longer protecting an image. She was fighting for something pure, the truth her mother had always believed in. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You said to see people for who they are, not what they wear. I see them now, Mom. Every single one." The next morning, her bail hearing was a media carnival. Reporters screamed her name as guards escorted her through the courthouse steps. "Elara. Did you kill your father? Are you still the CEO of Rowan Holdings? Did your sister help you cover it up?" Each flash of a camera was a strike of lightning in human form. In the front row of the courtroom sat Ria, tear-streaked, fragile but present. Their eyes met. For the first time in their lives, Ria wasn't pretending. She was simply there. And that gave Elara strength. Her attorney whispered, "We can argue for release under monitoring, but it's a long shot unless we produce something solid." Elara's gaze shifted toward the back of the room, to Tomas, seated alone, avoiding her eyes. Something inside her hardened. That night, after her release on conditional bail, Elara went home, not to the penthouse, but to the boutique. Her true kingdom. The place that had built her and betrayed her in equal measure. She unlocked the door. The lights flickered on, revealing rows of mannequins cloaked in black cloth, their stillness almost human. The rain returned, tapping softly against the glass. She walked to her work table and opened her laptop. Dozens of encrypted messages blinked. Among them, one new email, no sender. No subject. Only a file attached, truth.wave. She hesitated, then clicked play. Tomas's voice filled the room. "They're moving tonight. The board's voting to remove her as CEO. They think the scandal's enough to push her out. But they don't know she still has control of the master ledger. If she releases it, everything collapses. Tell them to make it look like an accident. No witnesses." Elara froze. The second voice, low, familiar, sent a chill through her chest. Understood, said the voice of Adler, her CFO. Her breath caught. Adler, the man she'd trusted to protect her empire. The man who'd told her to distance emotionally. He had orchestrated everything. The leaks. The smear. The death. The shock gave way to something deeper, not rage, not grief, but purpose. Ilara copied the file to an external drive, slid it into her pocket, and closed the laptop. Then she made a call. Agent Pierce? It's Ilara Morgan. You wanted truth? I'm ready to give it. The next morning, the world watched as Ilara walked into the federal building, not as a suspect, but as a witness. Cameras flashed, headlines screamed Rowan speaks. Her expression was unreadable, half steel, half grace. Inside, she met Pierce again. He looked surprised but resolute. You have something for us, he asked. She handed him the drive. Everything. Recordings, correspondence, corporate shells. Adler has been laundering assets through a foreign trust tied to the same consortium that bought my father's debt. Pierce frowned. Why come forward now? Because you were right, she said. Survival requires sacrifice. Pierce studied her. You know this could cost you your company. I built it once, she said softly. I can build again. But this time, without blood on the seams. He nodded. We'll need your statement and your cooperation on the arrests. I'll testify. That night, the news cycle turned like a tide. Rowan CEO exposes corporate conspiracy, CFO in custody. Ilara Morgan cleared in father's death. A fashion empire's redemption, but she didn't watch the coverage. Instead, she sat alone in the boutique, lights dimmed, the smell of fabric and lavender filling the air. Ria arrived quietly, a small suitcase in hand. You're free, she said. They cleared you. Ilara nodded. Freedom doesn't feel like I thought it would. Ria hesitated, then added, you did the right thing. Ilara smiled faintly. It only feels right when it hurts. They stood together in silence. For once, no words were needed. After a while, Ria asked, what happens now? Ilara looked around the boutique, the space that had hidden her empire and her truth. Now, she said softly. Now I stop hiding. Hours later, she stepped onto the boutique's rooftop. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and luminous beneath the first hint of dawn. She inhaled deeply, the air cool and clean. In her pocket, her mother's old notebook rested against her hand. She opened it to the last line, the ink faded but legible, power can build or destroy. Choose which you leave behind. She whispered, I choose to build. Below her, the first delivery trucks began to arrive, the start of another workday, another beginning. The world would move on, but this time, so would she. As the sun broke through the clouds, light spilled across the rooftop, catching the silver seam of her coat, imperfect, hand-stitched, honest. For the first time in her life, Ilara Morgan didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And it was enough. 6 months later, winter arrived quietly, folding the city into a gentler rhythm. The rain that once mirrored chaos now fell with purpose, washing the glass towers clean and softening even the hardest streets. The headlines had changed. Scandals decayed faster than truth. The world had found new stories to devour, new villains to crown. And somewhere beneath that endless noise, Ilara Morgan disappeared again, not in shame this time, but in choice. The boutique on Cypress Avenue reopened under a new name, Mira Atelier. The sign was small, almost humble, carved from reclaimed wood and hand-painted letters. Inside, there were no cameras, no corporate emblems, no curated perfection. Just fabric. Work tables. Light. And people. She had kept the old sewing machine her mother loved, its silver pedal polished by years of feet and faith. Beside it, a framed photo, Margaret Morgan, smiling with a pair of scissors in hand, the same image once printed on a forgotten funeral program. That day, the shop smelled of rain, fresh linen, and warm bread from the bakery next door. Ria stood behind the counter, hair tied back, hands busy folding garments for a client. Her movements were slower now, deliberate. She didn't perform anymore, she participated. When Elara entered, the bell chimed softly. "You're late," Rhea teased, smiling without the practiced edge she once wore. "I stopped by the community center," Elara said, unwrapping her scarf. "The mentorship program's already full. We'll need to open another class." Rhea's eyes brightened. "You're serious?" "I'm serious about everything now," Elara said. Rhea laughed, the sound light, real. Who knew scandal could lead to charity? Elara smiled faintly. Who knew forgiveness could start with work? In the corner, the door opened again. An older woman entered, hesitant, clutching a dress wrapped in plastic. "Can you fix this?" she asked. Elara took the dress, inspected the seam. "Of course." The woman exhaled, relieved. "It belonged to my daughter. She wore it to her interview, before the bank collapse." Before, her voice trailed off, but Elara understood. The bank. The fraud. The fallout. "I'm sorry," Elara said softly. "We'll make it right." The woman didn't recognize her, of course. To her, Elara was just a seamstress. A helper. Not the woman once called Rowan. And for the first time, Elara didn't need to be recognized. She mended the dress herself that afternoon, every stitch a prayer for repair, not just of fabric, but of faith. Later that evening, when the last customer left, Elara climbed the narrow stairs to the rooftop. The city stretched below, a scatter of gold and blue lights, pulsing like the heartbeat of something alive and forgiven. Rhea joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The empire. The press. The power?" Elara took a sip, the steam warming her face. "Sometimes I miss the illusion of control," she admitted. "But not what it cost." "What did it cost?" "My peace. My mother's lessons. The parts of myself I stitched too tightly to ever breathe." Rhea nodded slowly. "I think I know what that feels like." Elara smiled gently. "You're learning faster than I did." They stood in silence for a while, watching the wind comb through the streetlights. Somewhere, music drifted from an open window, a piano, hesitant and human. "Do you think people can really change?" Rhea asked. Elara considered. "I think people can remember who they were before they forgot." A week later, she met Agent Pierce again, not in an office this time, but at a small cafe near the waterfront. The case was over. Adler had pled guilty. Tomas was serving a sentence reduced by cooperation. The consortium had dissolved under public scrutiny. Justice, imperfect but tangible, had been done. Pierce looked different without his badge, less formal, more human. "You disappeared," he said. "I needed silence," she replied. He nodded. "You could have rebuilt Rowan Holdings. Investors were waiting. You walked away from billions." "Money doesn't rebuild character," she said simply. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were dangerous." "I was," she said. "But only to myself." They talked for a while about small things, coffee beans, travel, the weather. For once, the conversation wasn't about power or evidence. Just 2 people who had both lived too long inside institutions that measured worth in outcomes. When they stood to leave, Pierce said, "If you ever need a reference, you have one." She laughed softly. "For what?" "Sewing?" "For truth," he said. Spring came. The city thawed. Life, as it does, insisted on continuation. The boutique became a quiet refuge for women who'd lost everything to the scandals, former bank employees, designers, single mothers, young apprentices. They learned to sew, to price, to balance ledgers. But more importantly, they learned that creation could be a form of healing. One morning, Elara arrived to find a letter waiting on her work table. No name on the envelope. Just a single folded page inside. "You taught me that redemption isn't given, it's earned. I'll spend my life trying to earn it. Thank you. T." She read it twice, then tucked it beneath her mother's photo. In May, Elara received an invitation, a gala in Paris honoring visionary women in design. Rowan Holdings had nominated her, citing unparalleled integrity. She smiled at the irony. The woman once accused of fraud now being celebrated for truth. She didn't go. Instead, she mailed a check to the awards foundation, enough to fund scholarships for 3 young designers from low-income families. She signed it anonymous. That evening, she found herself walking through her mother's old garden behind the boutique. The lilies had begun to bloom again, real ones this time, white and fragrant. She knelt to touch a petal, its surface cool and alive. Ria appeared in the doorway, holding a phone. "You got a message from Forbes. They want an interview, the return of Elara Morgan." Elara stood, brushing soil from her hands. "Tell them she's not returning." Ria tilted her head. "Then who are you now?" Elara looked at the garden, at the life that kept insisting on growing through cracks, at the rain-streaked glass of the boutique reflecting both of them. "I'm whoever I was before the world started watching," she said. "And maybe that's enough." As night fell, she returned to her work table one last time. The old sewing machine waited patiently. A half-finished garment rested beneath the needle, black silk, delicate and strong. The same material her mother once worked with, the same blouse left unfinished the day she died. Elara ran her fingers along the fabric's edge and began to sew. The rhythmic hum filled the room, steady, certain, alive. She thought of everything that had led here, the humiliation, the empire, the betrayal, the revelation, the forgiveness. Each stitch became a memory, not erased, but transformed. Outside, the wind softened. The city exhaled. When she finished the last seam, she held the blouse up to the light. It wasn't perfect. A few uneven lines, a tiny snag at the collar. But it was hers, flawed, truthful, human. She folded it gently and placed it beside the framed photograph of her mother. Then she turned off the lights, leaving the boutique bathed in moonlight. Before stepping out, she whispered to the room, "Mom, the seam's held." The next morning, the shop opened again. A bell chimed, someone laughed, and the city began another day, unaware that its quietest redemption had already taken place. And somewhere, in the faint echo of a sewing machine's hum, the world kept spinning, a little softer, a little kinder, held together by invisible threads of grace. Final lines: the woman who once built empires now built mercy, one stitch at a time. And though the world would forget her name again, it would forever wear the clothes she made from truth. True strength isn't found in power, perfection, or the image we build for the world. It's found in the courage to face our truth, no matter how imperfect, painful, or unpolished it may be. Elara's journey teaches that healing begins when we stop hiding behind success and start rebuilding from honesty. Money fades, names are forgotten, but character, the quiet grace to admit our flaws and still choose to do good, endures forever. In the end, every life, like fabric, will tear and fray, but the one stitched with truth never truly fall apart.